Let's just kind of start from kind of the beginning, even before the landfall of Hurricane Harvey, and kind of talk about maybe about maybe about a week, 10 days ago, when you first started hearing about this storm. What kind of things were you seeing? What kind of things were you hearing? What was kind of going through your mind maybe about a week, 10 days ago?
So I think that's a great place to start because I grew up here, my family lives here, and we get hurricanes all the time. So for my brother and I, it was just there's a storm in the Gulf, it's down south of the Yucatan, no big deal, it'll hit who knows where. And then my brother calls me and says, that tropical depression's heading our way and it's going to escalate. I said, really? So I checked the map and it's heading straight for Texas with a path charted due north. And I think that's when it started to become real that, okay, we need to prepare, but still thinking it's routine, make sure we have enough water, make sure we have batteries, gas up the cars. And everyone I live around and work with is doing the same thing. Same stuff we go through every storm, every summer. Um, and then the storm just kept escalating, went from a depression to a tropical storm to a category 1 hurricane, all the way up to, I believe, a 4 when it made landfall. And that's what really got my brother and I surprised us is this storm just escalated really fast, got really powerful, really big. So when it made landfall near Corpus Christi, it was a serious hurricane, not just another storm. Um, and for my brother and I, our mother lives about halfway between the two of us, so it's what we do about mom. Coworkers are checking on each other, everybody's checking on their families, um, and then things just escalated from there faster than I think any of us expected them to. And that was probably Thursday, Friday last week.
So a lot of the things that was talked about early, right after landfall, was evacuation and all that kind of stuff. From what I've been reading and what I've been seeing, the storm strengthened so much that that was probably not an option because everybody on the coast there is kind of watching this and they were talking about Hurricane Rita and the tragic stories of people trying to get out of Houston there. But in your head and in your discussions with your friends and family, there was, how much was evacuation in your mind, or how much was of a priority, that Wednesday, Thursday area.
Right. So I think if you're talking about Houston, evacuation was not a thought on our minds or anybody's minds. And there's a couple important reasons for that. The death toll is currently 28 people. 100 people died in the Hurricane Rita evacuation, and that evacuation missed Houston. Or sorry, that hurricane missed Houston. So I had just moved back to the area then. We remember that. And the emergency planning authorities factor that in, and there were no orders to evacuate. The county judge and mayor have caught a lot of flack for that nationally, but I think they were right. Um, we still have lost a third of the lives that we lost during an evacuation for a storm that missed us. And I think people who don't live down here don't quite appreciate we're a city of 2.2 million, a county of 4.4 million, and that doesn't even count all the surrounding cities. You have a 8 county area of 6, 7 million people. Limited, well, we have a great freeway system, but you put 7 million people out on the roads and then county roads, back roads, some of which are flooded, some are impassable. You could have literally a disaster just in the evacuation. Um, many smaller towns in the path of the storm did evacuate closer to Corpus Christi and Rockport. But I think for 2 reasons evacuation wasn't considered. One, feasibility is a big problem, and two, our experience with evacuation is pretty terrible. You alluded to some stories. I mean, there were a busload of senior citizens died when it caught fire, trying to get away, and people remember that.
So landfall happens late Friday night, early Saturday morning, and as I'm watching the news, kind of on Saturday, they said, okay, there was landfall, there's some wind damage, but the real story now is going to be the amount of rainfall and the history. And I wasn't really that familiar with the history of Houston and flooding. So I mean, you're very familiar with that. Tell my audience a little bit about your history of flooding in the Houston area, and then what are your thoughts going in all day Saturday? Are you starting to see some things rise on that you see starting to see some water on Saturday and Saturday morning, afternoon, night? What are you seeing on that Saturday?
Yeah, so that's actually a great point about the rain. One thing that's very different about this storm is it had high winds, but it dumped a huge amount of rain. And this gets into a bit of science, but we talk about the dirty side of the storm down here. And what that means is these storms rotate counterclockwise. And if you're on the east side of the storm and it's right off the Gulf of Mexico, it's picking up all the water from the Gulf and then dumping it once it hits land. So Corpus Christi and Rockport, southwest of us, got the high winds, they got the tidal surge, the waves, stuff that's very damaging and dangerous. And then the storm headed towards San Antonio, then started going back south to the coast, which hardly ever happens. They usually spin off into central Texas, end up in the Midwest or Arkansas or Tennessee, and things slowly peter out. This one went back south and then started running up the coast straight for Houston. So it just kept pushing more and more rain our way, dumping more and more rain our way. Um, and that really became the huge issue. Um, you see the stats on TV, probably everyone's seen them, but we've gotten more rain in one storm than we average in a year. And it's the biggest storm I or anyone else can remember in terms of rainfall. And people I know who were here during Tropical Storm Allison, that flooded Houston, created dramatic images on TV, killed a fair number of people. This was bigger and dumped more rain. And that's mind boggling because I remember the images of freeways underwater with semis floating. And this is a worse storm. So if you flash forward to flood control, to make it simple, if you dial the clock back to before Houston was settled, this was a swamp. And the swamp filled up with water, the bayous drained it out to Galveston Bay. As people settled and we developed the area, the bayous were preserved, but turned into flood control channels. Houston keeps growing and growing and really takes off after World War II. And now we're at the size that I mentioned, and we sprawl over almost the entire county. So Houston has a reputation well earned for being a very wide, broad city. So you take all these bayous that were turned into flood channels in the 50s. You have reservoirs west of town that were built in the 40s. And then you dump a year of rain in 3 days on that system, and it just overloaded it. And the story of my neighborhood, we live a quarter mile off what's called Brays Bayou, which runs basically west to east through our neighborhood and out to Galveston Bay. It's set up as a flood control channel. 99% of the time, it's 2 feet deep. It has a really nice green belt along it. You walk, you jog. It's an attractive place to go exercise, and why a lot of people come to the area. Then you dump all this rain, and we're draining not just our neighborhood, we're draining 168,000 people who live in the watershed of this bayou. That was really our problem. It's not what's dumped on our neighborhood, it's that we're getting everything dumped in that whole watershed that's got to go through our neighborhood to get to the Gulf. And you multiply that by all the bayous in Houston. There's 5 or 6 major bayous. Every single one works the same way as flood control, but you dump enough rain on it, you fill up the reservoirs, fill up the retention basins, and the water's got to go somewhere.
Now, one of the cool
Work.
things about technology is that of course, Facebook. And I saw you sharing on your Facebook feed over that weekend. Um, it was probably an app for, I don't know if it was the Bayou or if it was what was that you were measuring that just that kept going up as far as the
Yeah.
water and all that.
So one thing the flood control authority's done really well is all the monitoring stations are linked to their website, and anyone can pull up the website, pull up any monitoring station they want. So the station I kept posting is the one about 2.5 miles from my house on this bayou. So we're watching it like hawks, watching the water level go up, seeing if it's going to top the banks. And once it topped the banks, then it goes over the banks and the waters are flowing down into the neighborhoods, which are slightly lower than the banks. Um, my house is actually higher than the top of the bank, but the water, once it overflows the banks, comes down the streets and gets trapped. And then its only way out is the storm drains. Well, the storm drains go back into the bayou. So storm drains don't empty when the bayou's full. And that's when the neighborhood floods. I mean, literally, my backyard drains to the street drains to the bayou. When the bayou's full, it's like a full bathtub, and everything just goes backwards. So my house ended up flooding from all sides and through water coming up through the foundation.
Yeah, I was on call last weekend, and I was up at 4 or 5, 6 o'clock Eastern time, before dawn on Sunday, and I saw you were posting things, and I saw that you were posting the water creeping towards your front door. What were the feelings going through your head? I mean, and I know it was before dawn because it was pretty dark out there. I mean,
Yeah.
did you not sleep the night before? What was going through your mind that night before?
We didn't sleep a lot at all because there was a tornado warning between 8 and 9 p.m. after the tornadoes had struck a neighborhood 10 miles south of us. And I could see the lightning flashes and thunder of that storm. So we started off the night huddled in the interior hallway of our house, waiting for a tornado to hit, which thankfully it didn't hit us. Um, then we check the gauge, we look out the door. Okay, the street's filling. All right, it's coming up the sidewalk a little bit. In our experience, the water never quite got into our house, even in serious floods we had 2 years ago. Um, but we keep checking because this is a big storm and we're watching that big mass of rain on the radar. And the water keeps coming up and then it starts seeping in. We put towels on all the door jambs, but it just keeps seeping in, soaks the towels. And really, pretty fast, we had 3 to 4 inches in the house. Um, Thankfully, before that, my wife had already raised up furniture, got the kids to put all their stuff up, and we elevated as many things as we could, thinking we'll get a few inches in the house, worst case scenario. But in the past floods, the water had stopped literally a few inches shy of the door, and we were dry because we're a little bit higher than other parts of the street. But this water just kept going. So that's when it switched from something that seemed a potential problem, but not a significant problem, to this is a flood and we are in the middle of it and this is real. And that was the biggest thing for me is it went from just another hurricane like I've been through before in my life to I'm now in the middle of a flood and we got to get out.
And so Sunday, I'm at the hospital, I'm making rounds and all that, and I see you posting from your car or something like that. You went to one place or another place, and I know you wanted to share your story there. And so, what was the thinking there? Is that you just wanted to share kind of what was going on from your in your neighborhood or in your point of view, or what was your thinking there?
Yeah, so it's a mix of one is curiosity. Honestly, a lot of us wanted to get out and see what was going on, including the morning the flooding hit. I got on bathing suit and water shoes and a raincoat and went out to reconnoiter the area to see how bad was the flooding. Is this bad enough we have to get out? Is this something that we think will pass? And that's where some of that video footage. There's a point where I'm walking across a bridge that crosses the bayou, and I'm walking from what we call South Braeswood Boulevard to North Braeswood, and I'm walking towards a nursing home. It's been in the area for years, and that's where I'm in chest deep water and looking at flooded cars. And um, that's when I turned around because I could feel the currents. I was a Boy Scout. I know floodwaters kill you. I'm gonna head back to the house. I get back to the house, the water's still coming up, and we can tell it's not going down anytime soon because a bayou that's usually 2 feet deep is now flooding an area that's probably half a mile across, quarter mile across. Um, and we know from past floods, it drains down to the neighborhoods, gets stuck, and everything keeps filling up. So at that point, we got the dogs, we got the kids, we grabbed whatever we needed as necessities, and headed out the door into knee to waist high water. Had to walk down the street and then down about 6 blocks to get to my sister in law's house, who hadn't flooded yet. The water was probably a foot from her door. And that was the really scary part. Words can't describe what it's like to be leading your family and your pets who are swimming and your children who are wading through debris. We're getting pushed by currents because the water's draining back in the neighborhood. And we're literally wading through that flood water trying to get to safety. I've never been through that before. And I have never been more afraid of my life.
Now,
Because I
what's
was
your
thinking, this is real. We could drown. We could be hurt. I could lose a family member. My
wow.
daughter's 5'1". You know, I'm telling her, watch out for that current coming down that street. Turn sideways. Be careful. And they did great. But feeling that fear is totally different from reading about it.
And did you lose electricity at all? Did you lose power at all during any of that time?
No, we had power the whole time, which was ironic and didn't help a whole lot. So we got to my sister-in-law's house. Luckily, her house was, like I said, still dry, even though there was water coming up the yard. And that's when things seemed to peak. She's just farther enough from the bayou that she's in a 500-year floodplain. So we were able to get in her house, bring our dogs in, us in, clean off, dry off, get warm clothes, and hunker down, as the saying goes down here. So you can imagine, two full families and 6 dogs, because we had 2 dogs from somebody else, um, all sitting in this house waiting to see if the water's going to keep going. Because the possibility is water keeps rising, we have to evacuate her house. And at that point, we're walking in floodwater to a shelter because the cars are either flooded out or stuck in the driveway. My brother-in-law's car was at a friend's house. They had to walk home through floodwater the night before. So we're stuck. And at that point, thankfully, the water stopped rising and we could wait it out.
Now, did you know kind of the scope of what was happening, in the greater Houston area? I mean, were you connected to? I mean, I guess you were connected to Facebook and things. I mean, were you aware what was happening in other parts of the city, or not?
Yeah.
Or
Um, so definitely what to me is so striking about this, not just through social media, but in terms of the impact of the storm, since it was hitting the whole greater Houston area, an 8-county area, I'm checking the flood gauge near my mother's house, which is sitting at my old high school. I'm checking the gauges near my brother's house, texting him, calling my mother. One of my high school buddies is on Facebook Live on the other side of the bayou, showing the water coming up his driveway. So really, we use social media to keep track of each other and the internet to access the flood gauges to figure out, do we stay or do we go? Who's in trouble? Who do we need to call to check on? So in one way we're isolated, another way we're totally connected, which is really kind of a bizarre situation to be in. You know everything, yet you're still isolated and potentially in peril. But you also can check on friends, family, colleagues to get a sense of what's happening. So I think that helped keep us from feeling isolated. And I was worried about my mother. I want to make sure my brother was okay. Friends I've known for 30 plus years are all weathering the same storm, and we're all trying to make sure everybody's all right.
so did those people's power go out? Were you disconnected from them? Was there a time where you didn't know what was happening, or was
Um,
anybody very fortunate that?
Really not. I mean, at one point, the transformer behind my sister-in-law's house caught fire and burned out, but we still had cell service. So unlike other hurricanes, cell towers were all active. So we just switched to cellular access and we're able to still stay in touch. We weren't going outside to look around because it was clear to me from my earlier adventure it was pretty dangerous to do so. But yeah, we never really felt totally cut off. But I think having that access helped because if we hadn't had internet, hadn't had power, all you see is black outside your windows, and all you hear is rain, and all you see is water coming up your yard. Um,
Yeah, I mean, how does that feel to, just have minutes and minutes and hours and days of just hearing rain and just being cloudy and not seeing the sun. I mean, that's gotta like mess with your head a little bit and saying, it's is this a bad movie? Is it going to stop anytime soon? Because you've been through these, something like this before, and obviously, like, as everybody said, it's been nothing like you've had before. But just days and days and days of just the rain. I mean, that's gotta just make you go
yeah,
nuts.
it was a lot more drawn out, and that's I think one of the really hard things about hurricanes in general, and this storm in particular, was how drawn out it is. So you're wired, you're edgy, you're worried, you're nervous, you're anxious. You're trying to decide: should I stay? Should I go? Should I go pick up my mother? Is she safer in her neighborhood than mine? All these decisions are in your head, and we're all trying to work because maybe it'll miss us and it'll just keep on going and this will blow over. So that week beforehand, all that's going on. And then even through the weekend, same thing. And yeah, I'm used to hurricanes that blow through usually in 24 hours, do a lot of damage, but then they're gone, sun comes out, you clean up, and it sucks. It's terrible, but it passes. This was so drawn out. I think the tension, anxiety were a lot higher for everybody. Um, and that added a whole nother level of really disaster to this is how do you emotionally and mentally handle that prolonged time period? I've never served in combat. I have no idea what it's like to serve, but I imagine that's got to be a little bit of what soldiers waiting for a battle feel. And I'm thinking if this is a little bit of what they feel, I can't conceive of what that's really like. But this little piece of that anxiety is just very tough. Um,
And I would imagine that, your friends and your family and your kids, had a lot of questions like, hey, why is this going on for days and days and days? And they're probably looking to you. And what do you tell your family? What do you tell your kids about, this
yeah.
this
Um,
epic storm that never happens?
so I'll start with the dogs. And this sounds like a silly thing, but we're dog people. We love our pets. And the dogs were so anxious, circling the house, panting constantly. You could just feel their anxiety. Um, the kids actually did pretty well. My niece is in grade school, but she's been through Hurricane Ike, where they're in the house we're in now, and they were without power for 2 weeks. And my brother-in-law says he thought the house was going to shake apart. My kids went through Ike too, and were without power. They're in high school. They're a junior and senior. Um, so they were really keeping themselves under control. But when I talked to them, they were really, really anxious too. They're just trying really hard to keep it together. And I just try to keep reassuring them that we're here, we're with family, we're together, we'll all help each other, and we will get through this. Dad's been through it before, mom's been through it before, your aunt and uncle have been through it before. Um, I guess the things you always tell your children that it'll be okay, but you're telling them at the same time, it might not be okay, and we might have to take off again.
And
I don't
you're
want to exaggerate. We're never in, I think, danger of death, but there were several moments where I had to think about the possibility and see it coming and make sure we did the right things to avoid it.
so you're at your sister's, and I guess you're just kind of waiting for. I presume you'd have to wait for the authorities to say, hey, it's okay to go outside or it's okay to go to your house. Like what is that the process of trying to get back to your house and trying to do that? Is you have to wait for the
Yeah.
authorities to kind of clear that?
I literally, my brother-in-law and I were just glued to those flood gauge sites, checking them, refreshing them constantly, waiting for the water to top. There's a graph that I posted several times. There's a little blue line, and we're just waiting for it to go below the top of the bank. And when it finally started going down, we walked around. The streets near her were dry, except for water in the gutters. So I started heading towards my house. The first attempt, we got halfway there, and my son and I turned around because we could tell the water wasn't drivable. The second time, walked it a little more. It's like, hey, it's dry. Great. Son, let's get in the car. We need to grab a few things. Um, there's some stuff he wanted to check on. And, we wanted to get out because we've been cooped up in the house for several days. So we get halfway down the main boulevard, gets through some floodwaters, gets dry again, turn onto the street. I'm able to get down the street, get up my driveway, check on my wife's car. House is still flooded. It's a pond from one side of the street to the other. And then I look back down the driveway and the water's gotten higher. And it's over the wheels of this truck that's stuck in the middle of the street. And then I look back at the big tow truck that's stuck in our neighborhood and it's up to the flatbed of the tow truck. And I had really this moment of fear that this is what they always told us in Boy Scouts was a situation to get out of. The water's rising. And if I don't do this right, I'm going to flood my engine. The car's going to be stuck. I'll lose my car. And my son and I are going to have to wade back through floodwaters to get out. And that'll happen in just a few minutes. I got out of the house and grabbed what we needed. We're going to try to get to the Walmart to see if it's open. And the water's just shot way up and drove halfway across the yard, got into the street, got out. Thank God the car engine didn't flood. And we got back home to my sister-in-law's house. And they didn't go out for a while after that.
Yeah, I mean,
That was that moment of, I've got a second to make a decision. And if I don't do this just right, my son and I are in real trouble. And thank heavens I made the right decision and did it the right way. But that moment will be etched in my mind for not being sure. And that's where I get back to the confidence is I had this kind of false confidence that I've been through these for 47 years. And I've never had that moment of, we might not get out of this if we don't do this right. That was chilling. And my son was a trooper, but it's like, son, we have to go now. Get in the car. In that tone of voice, when your father says that, you get in the car as fast as you can, but you're shaking inside.
wow. So you get back.
Sorry, my father wasn't there to help me, I could have
uh,
used him.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So you get back and then you get back to kind of refreshing uh, the levels and things and then trying to kind of see where things stand.
Yeah. The
Um,
things really improved after that. The rain, we got more and more gaps in the rain bands. The neighborhood slowly started to drain. We were finally able to get back to the house. And after the streets were completely dry, because I didn't try that again driving through floodwaters. You can do that once, and you don't get a second chance.
so
Um,
what was it like when you first saw sunlight and no less clouds and no clouds? What was that feeling like?
I'll I'll tell it this way: I didn't even know the sun had come out until we were watching the news because the power had come back on, and the newscasters pulled up a shot of the sun and said, "Hey, look!" And they all turned around. These are like pro newscasters, very sophisticated. They're all like, "Wow, the sun's out!" And then I look out the window. Hey, what do you know? The sun's out. Um, and we all had, I imagine, this collective moment citywide of everyone from these professional newscasters down to me and my brother and sister-in-law's living room, suddenly realizing, oh, it's not raining anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So it
Um,
was, I won't say magical, but it was a pretty powerful moment.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. I just saw the people kind of talking to newscasters about what it was like to see the sun after days and days of days of rain and clouds. So if I follow the timeline right, so you got back into your house yesterday and started cleaning things up. Is that right, or what was that like?
Yeah, so when we first went back into the house, we could see the water was 6 inches high, um, a lot of water damage. Um, then we get back into the house, really start cleaning up. Probably 3 days ago, um, and my cousin and I decide, okay, let's start taking up the hardwood because we had hardwood floors in half of our house. It's all ruined. We know the walls have got to come out next. We're hoping some furniture can be saved. Trying to pull up this hardwood, um, and I laugh now because I all my life had wanted hardwood floors in a house that I own someday. I will never buy hardwood again because it's like taking out a jigsaw puzzle that some jerk glued together everywhere. And we're trying to pry apart this hardwood, and it takes us like 5 hours, and we complete one room, and we're about to fall over from exhaustion. And the water coming out smells like a combination of cadavers from med school and bilge pump water, and that's spraying on us, and it's damp, and the house smells like a swamp. Um, and look at each other and realize, okay, we've done one room in 5 hours. We're exhausted. We got 6 rooms to go, and we haven't even started on the walls or the furniture. And there's mud everywhere, and it smells to high heaven. That was just humbling. It's like I don't know how long it'll take me to finish cleaning out my house, even working as hard as I can. I could be at this a week, 2 weeks, and that's just to clean it out. That's not to even make it livable yet. So back to my sister-in-law's house we go because we still can't sleep in the house. It's still not really habitable. Um, and that was really, yeah. I put on Facebook how I felt last night. I hit a low. I mean, I thought I know we can get through this abstractly, but this is going to take so long, take so much effort, and all the emotions just hit me all at once. And a medical issue that I've been kind of nursing for a couple of weeks cropped up right in the middle of all this, that I had to deal with personally. And that's when it was just I got to check out for a while mentally, and take a break. Um,
So is that kind of where things stand now? Is that you're in the slow process of cleaning out your home and going, you know, trying to go room by room and trying to go as diligently and as fast as you can to do that. And obviously, it's a long process and taking breaks and getting fatigued and going back to your sister's house. And but that's kind of where things stand as far as your home at this point.
yeah. So today, the crew from a local real estate agency showed up. We had 10 folks to help us. So we got all the hardwood cleared out, took out all the furniture that was damaged, saved what we're going to save, cleaned up all the rooms, at least in terms of getting stuff off the floor and bagged up. And basically, it's sorting what do we throw away, what do we dry out and try to keep. And the street's dry, the house is drying. Um, Tomorrow, we'll meet with the contractor we've used for household work, and his crew will start tearing out the walls. Um, and we'll go from there. I mean, long term, we got to fix floors, we're going to have to replace walls, replace furniture. All the mattresses are unusable. Um, Tear out cabinets. And what strikes me is I never realized what flood depth means. So if 6 inches in my house destroys the furniture, the walls, and the floors, now I get how 3 feet destroys a house. And when I saw stories on the news about somebody with 3 or 4 feet of water in their house, like, oh, their house is gone. They're gonna have to raise it or strip it and rebuild. Um, that's really sobering. I mean, we'll be okay long term, but it's gonna be a long term struggle for us to get back
I'm
to normal.